It was a cold morning in Pretoria, 1962. The air trembled with silence, the kind of silence that hides fear. Behind heavy iron bars stood a man who had challenged an empire. They called him a criminal. Yet the world would one day call him a savior. That morning, Nelson Mandela was not facing prison. He was facing death itself. South Africa in the early 1960s was a land divided by color, fear, and fire. The system of apartheid had tightened its grip, separating black and white, rich and poor, freedom and obedience. Streets were patrolled by armed police. Conversations whispered in secret. Every face carried suspicion. Every word could mean prison. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, born in 1918 in the small village of Mvizo, had already become one of the most hunted men in the nation. A lawyer by profession, he had traded the comfort of courtrooms for the danger of revolution. Alongside Oliver Tambo and Walter Sisulu, he co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, the spear of the nation, the armed wing of the African National Congress. To his followers, he was a beacon of hope. To the regime, a threat that needed to be silenced. By 1962, his voice had become too powerful to ignore. Secret meetings, underground plans, and a growing international spotlight had made Mandela the heartbeat of South Africa's resistance. But in August of that year, fate caught up with him. His car was stopped near Howick, and in an instant his freedom vanished. He was charged with incitement, sabotage, and treason, crimes that, under apartheid law, carried one sentence: death. The world watched as this young revolutionary, dressed in prison gray, walked calmly into the courtroom that could decide his fate. He stood not as a victim, but as a man ready to die for an idea that all men, black and white, deserved equality, dignity, and freedom. Inside the courtroom, Mandela faced not just the judges, but the weight of a nation's pain. The walls were lined with soldiers, their rifles gleaming under the pale light. In the back, whispers of fear mixed with hope. Everyone knew, if Mandela fell, the dream of freedom might fall with him. But the real battle was not against the law. It was against his own humanity. For months, he had been kept in isolation, his wife, Winnie, forbidden to see him, his children growing up without his voice. Every night, he asked himself the same question: was the sacrifice worth it? Could one life truly awaken millions? Mandela had already seen comrades tortured, families torn apart, and the light of hope dimmed by bullets and prison gates. Yet in that moment, he understood that history demands a price. Freedom, he believed, was never given. It was earned in suffering. He wrote letters from his cell, each word measured, each line soaked in quiet strength. "I have learned," he once wrote, "that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." Still, the fear was real. The possibility of death loomed over every sunrise. He missed the laughter of his daughters, the warmth of home, the scent of the earth after rain in Kunu. He missed being human. And yet, when the guards opened his cell door, he would rise, adjust his prison jacket, and walk with dignity. Because even if they took his life, they could never imprison his soul. The trial stretched on for months. Outside, the world was waking up to South Africa's cruelty. Journalists whispered Mandela's name in the corridors of the United Nations. Students in London and New York held up signs that read, "Free Mandela." Yet inside the courtroom, he was a man with nothing, stripped of his home, his rights, even his future. But what happened next would shock the world. Instead of pleading for mercy, Mandela stood and faced the court, not as a man begging for life, but as a voice demanding justice. His eyes, calm yet piercing, met those of his oppressors. Then, with the weight of history pressing on his shoulders, he said, "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Those words froze the room. Even his prosecutors paused, unsure they had just heard a confession or a prophecy. Outside the courthouse, silence turned to murmurs, murmurs to cries, cries to chants. The regime wanted to destroy him, but his courage transformed him into something untouchable, a symbol. Behind bars, Mandela made a decision that would define him forever. He would not let hatred rot his heart. His battle was not against white men. It was against the system that made men hate each other. This was not weakness. It was control, discipline, purpose. As months became years and years became decades, he watched fellow prisoners break, lose hope, and fade. But Mandela stayed steadfast. Every sunrise behind the walls of Robben Island reminded him of one truth, that his sacrifice had meaning. He might never see freedom, but others would, and that he believed was enough. The day finally came, February 11th, 1990. The gates of Victor Verster prison creaked open. After 27 years of captivity, Nelson Mandela stepped into the light. The crowd roared, but he stood still, calm, like a man who had already walked through eternity. He did not smile at first. His eyes scanned the horizon, the faces, the flags, the chaos of freedom reborn. Then gently, he raised his hand in salute. The world saw a hero. He saw a battlefield yet to be won. Freedom had come, but at a price that only he could understand. His children had grown up as strangers. His marriage, once full of fire and promise, was now a memory burned by time and betrayal. The cause had triumphed, but the man had been broken. When he spoke to the nation, his voice carried both triumph and sorrow. I stand before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people. That humility became his power. He could have called for revenge, but instead, he offered forgiveness. He shook the hands of those who once caged him. Yet in the quiet of his nights, one wound remained unhealed, the betrayal of love, the silence of years lost. Mandela's strength was not that he never felt pain, but that he faced it with grace. The man who had faced death without fear now faced life, uncertain, scarred, but free. He had conquered the impossible, turning vengeance into peace, prison into purpose, and suffering into legacy. In the end, Mandela's story is not just about South Africa. It is about all of us. It is about how far a human heart can go before breaking, and what remains after it does. He showed that true freedom begins not when chains are broken, but when hatred ends. His life was proof that forgiveness is not weakness. It is strength in its purest form. Yet, even Mandela, the man who forgave an entire nation, could not forgive everything. There was one wound that never closed. It reminds us that even the greatest heroes remain human, capable of pain, pride, and heartbreak. And that perhaps is what made Mandela eternal. Not his perfection, but his humanity. When he died in 2013, the world mourned not just a leader, but a conscience. Millions gathered to honor the man who taught them that courage could live in gentleness, and victory could be found in mercy. His legacy lives in every voice that dares to speak, every child who believes they can change the world, every act of kindness born from pain. So, as we look back, one question remains. Would you have forgiven them? Would you have found peace after 27 years in chains? Because sometimes the hardest battle is not against others. It's against your own heart. He faced death without fear and life without bitterness. His story is a reminder that even in darkness, light can endure. If this story moved you, share it. Because history only lives through those who remember. And as always, candle, because some stories were never told until now.